Jimmy Cliff's Berlin Wall concert in 1987 was heard on both sides. Families separated for 26 years found each other through his music. It was June 12, 1987. On a warm summer evening in West Berlin, the Berlin Wall, that concrete monument to Cold War division, stretched like an ugly scar through the heart of what had once been a single city. For 26 years this barrier had separated not just East from West, but families from each other, lovers from their partners, and children from their parents. Jimmy Cliff was scheduled to perform at the Waldbühne, an outdoor amphitheater in West Berlin, as part of his European Give Thanks tour. But what started as a routine concert would become one of the most emotionally powerful performances in music history, a night when reggae music proved stronger than concrete walls and political ideology. The concert had been controversial from the moment it was announced. East German authorities had made it clear that any attempt to perform near the wall would be considered a provocation. West German officials worried that Jimmy's messages about freedom and unity might incite border incidents. Both sides preferred that musicians stay away from the most sensitive symbol of European division. But Jimmy Cliff had a different perspective. Music don't recognize no walls, no borders, no political systems, he had told reporters when asked about the controversy. Jazz love is for all people, East and West. If my music can reach over that wall and touch someone's heart, then that's where I need to be. What made this concert particularly significant was its location. The Waldbühne wasn't right at the wall, but it was close enough Netterscholdos, only about 3 miles away, that, on a quiet night with the right wind conditions, sound could carry across the checkpoint barriers and into East Berlin. Jimmy and his management team had chosen this venue specifically because they hoped the music might reach people on both sides of the divided city. Word of the concert had spread through both East and West Berlin's underground networks. In East Berlin, people whispered about the possibility of hearing live Western music without risking arrest for listening to forbidden radio broadcasts. In West Berlin, there was excitement about a concert that might serve as a symbol of resistance to the artificial division of their city. But nobody was prepared for what actually happened that night. The concert was scheduled to begin at 8 p.m., but by 6 p.m., something unprecedented was occurring along the Berlin Wall. East German border guards noticed unusual activity on their side. People were gathering near the wall in numbers they had never seen before. Not protesters or would-be escapees, but families carrying blankets, folding chairs, and small children. Hans Muller was a 52-year-old East Berlin factory worker who had not seen his sister Greta since August 13, 1961, the day the wall went up. On that morning, Greta had been visiting friends in West Berlin when the border was suddenly sealed. For 26 years, they had been able to exchange letters through official channels, but they had never heard each other's voice or seen each other's face. When Hans learned about Jimmy Cliff's concert, he made a decision that could have cost him his freedom. He gathered his wife Maria and their 2 teenage children and told them they were going to walk to the wall to try to hear Western music and maybe, just maybe, to somehow connect with Greta, who he hoped might be doing the same thing on the other side. "Papa, this is dangerous," his 17-year-old son Klaus had warned. "What if the guards arrest us?" Hans looked at his family with tears in his eyes. "Son, I haven't heard my sister's voice in 26 years. If there's any chance that music might bring us closer together, even separated by that wall, then it's worth the risk." Similar conversations were happening throughout both parts of the divided city. In West Berlin, Greta Müller-Schmidt had received a letter from her brother Hans just 2 weeks earlier. One of their regular monthly exchanges that had sustained their relationship despite the political barrier between them. In that letter, Hans had mentioned hearing about a reggae concert near the wall. "Maybe we will both listen to the same music at the same time," Hans had written, "and for a few hours we can pretend we're in the same place again." Greta had been planning to attend Jimmy Cliff's concert anyway. She was a fan of reggae music and its messages of unity and brotherhood. But reading her brother's letter gave the evening a different meaning. She would go not just to hear music, but to feel connected to family she had been forced to live without for more than half her lifetime. As the sun set over Berlin on June 12, something remarkable was happening on both sides of the wall. Thousands of people were gathering not for protest or political demonstration, but for the possibility of shared musical experience that might transcend the concrete and barbed wire that divided their city. The concert began exactly at 8 p.m. with Jimmy taking the stage at the Waldbühne in front of 12,000 West Berlin fans. But he was aware that his audience might be larger than the people he could see. Before launching into his first song, he addressed not just the crowd in front of him, but the city beyond. "Good evening, Berlin," Jimmy called into his microphone, his voice carrying through the amphitheater's sound system and out into the night air. "Tonight we make music not just for the people here, but for all the people of this city, east, west, and everywhere between. Music has no walls, and love has no borders." As Jimmy began his opening song, "You Can Get It If You Really Want," something unprecedented was happening 3 miles away at the Berlin Wall. The wind conditions were perfect, carrying the sound of reggae music clearly across the border into East Berlin, where hundreds of people had gathered to listen. But more than just listening was happening. People on both sides of the wall had brought handmade signs, flashlights, and even mirrors to catch the streetlights. As Jimmy's music filled the air, families separated by the barrier began trying to signal to each other, hoping against hope that their loved ones might be on the other side. Hans Müller stood with his family at Potsdamer Platz, one of the most heavily fortified sections of the wall. When Jimmy Cliff's voice came drifting over the barrier singing, "You Can Get It If You Really Want," Hans began to cry. The last time he had heard Western music with his sister was in 1961, when they had danced together at a family wedding just 2 weeks before the wall divided their lives forever. "Greta," he whispered into the night air, "can you hear this? Are you listening too?" On the other side of the wall, less than 50 yards away, Greta Miller-Schmidt was indeed listening. She had positioned herself as close to the barrier as West Berlin police would allow. And when she heard Jimmy Cliff's voice carrying over from the concert, she felt a connection to her brother that was stronger than any letter they had exchanged. As Jimmy launched into Many Rivers to Cross, both Hans and Greta began singing along the same song at the same time, separated by concrete but united by music that spoke directly to their situation. "Many rivers to cross, but I can't seem to find my way over." The lyrics took on profound meaning for the divided families listening on both sides of the wall. They had been trying to cross the metaphorical river that separated them for 26 years, kept apart by political systems that treated human relationships as obstacles to ideological purity. But then something magical began to happen. As Jimmy continued performing, people on both sides of the wall began to realize that their family members were likely listening to the same music. They started calling out names, hoping their voices might carry over the barrier. Hans Müller cupped his hands around his mouth and shouted, "Greta, Greta Müller, if you can hear me, I'm here." In the strange acoustics created by the wall's concrete surfaces and the quiet of the evening, his voice carried farther than he had imagined possible. On the West Berlin side, Greta heard a man's voice calling her maiden name, a name she hadn't used in years, but one that only her family would know to call. "Hans?" she screamed back, her voice breaking with emotion. "Hans, is that you?" The border guards on both sides were witnessing something they had never encountered in their training. Instead of escape attempts or political protests, they were watching families trying to reconnect through music and desperate hope. Many of the guards were young men who had grown up with the wall as a fact of life, but even they were moved by the raw emotion they were witnessing. On the East Berlin side, a young guard named Peter Schmidt approached Hans Müller's family. Hans feared he would be arrested for disturbing the peace, but instead the guard said quietly, "Mein Herr, if you stand on that concrete platform over there, your voice will carry better to the other side." The guard was risking his own career by helping facilitate communication across the border, but Jimmy Cliff's music had created an atmosphere where human compassion was overcoming political duty. As Jimmy performed The Harder They Come, his voice carrying over the wall with its message about fighting against impossible odds, something unprecedented began happening along the entire length of the barrier where people had gathered. Families were recognizing each other's voices, calling out across the divide, and sharing the same musical experience for the first time in more than a quarter century. The Brennan family had been split when the wall went up. Parents on the east side, grown children on the west side. As Jimmy sang, they were able to have their first real-time conversation in 26 years, shouting over the wall about grandchildren who had been born, jobs that had been lost and found, and love that had endured despite impossible circumstances. The Kohler family discovered that both sides had been listening to the same illegal Western radio broadcasts for years, following the same musicians and sharing the same musical tastes, despite being forbidden from sharing anything else. Most remarkably, several families began singing together the same songs at the same time, creating impromptu choruses that transcended the political barrier between them. When Jimmy reached the climax of his concert with "Give Thanks and Praise," something unprecedented occurred along the Berlin Wall. Thousands of people on both sides began singing together, their voices joining Jimmy's in a massive chorus that could be heard throughout the divided city. Give thanks and praise to the Most High Jah. For the first time since the wall had been built, East and West Berlin were united in song, sharing a moment of spiritual and emotional connection that no political system could regulate or control. But the most powerful moment came during Jimmy's encore performance of "Sitting in Limbo." As he sang about being stuck between places, unable to move forward or backward, families on both sides of the wall began sharing stories about their experiences of separation, shouting their histories over the concrete barrier, crying together, and finding comfort in knowing their loved ones had survived and thrived, despite the artificial division of their lives. East German border guards reported later that they had never seen anything like what occurred that night. Instead of tensions and potential conflicts, they witnessed pure human emotion and family love that made the wall seem temporarily irrelevant. When the concert officially ended at 11 p.m., Jimmy Cliff made an announcement that would be remembered as one of the most powerful moments in Berlin's Cold War history. "This wall can separate your bodies, but it cannot separate your hearts," he declared, his voice carrying clearly over both sides of the barrier. "Tonight you have proven that love is stronger than concrete, music is stronger than politics, and family is stronger than any system that tries to divide it. Keep singing, Berlin. Keep loving each other. Keep believing that this wall will not stand forever." The aftermath of Jimmy Cliff's Berlin Wall concert was immediate and lasting. Letters between separated family members increased dramatically in the weeks following the concert, with people sharing their experiences of that magical night when they had sung together despite being apart. More importantly, the concert had demonstrated to both East and West German authorities that the human cost of division was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. Border guards on both sides reported that the families they had encountered that night were not political dissidents or troublemakers, but ordinary people whose only crime was loving relatives on the other side of an artificial barrier. Several East German guards who had witnessed the concert requested transfers to other duties, saying they could no longer serve at a border that separated families who clearly belonged together. Some of these guards would later become advocates for the peaceful reunification process that began just 2 years later. The concert also inspired other musicians to perform near the wall, creating a series of cultural events that kept international attention focused on Berlin's division and the human cost of Cold War politics. When the Berlin Wall finally fell on November 9, 1989, just 2 years and 5 months after Jimmy Cliff's concert, many of the families who had connected through his music were among the first to cross into each other's arms. Hans and Greta Muller embraced for the first time in 28 years, both of them singing "Many Rivers to Cross" as they held each other and cried. Jimmy Cliff returned to Berlin in November 1989 to perform at the Brandenburg Gate celebration of the wall's fall. During his performance, he dedicated "Many Rivers to Cross" to all the families who never gave up hope, and who proved that love is stronger than any wall anyone can build. Today, a small plaque near the former location of the Berlin Wall commemorates the night of June 12, 1987, when reggae music temporarily united a divided city. The plaque reads, "On this site, families separated by politics found each other through music. No wall can silence the human heart." The story of Jimmy Cliff's Berlin Wall concert reminds us that even in the darkest periods of human division, music has the power to connect souls across any barrier. It proves that love between family members is stronger than any political system, and that sometimes the most powerful protests against injustice are not angry demonstrations, but simple acts of human connection and shared hope. The concert didn't bring down the Berlin Wall by itself, but it helped create the emotional and cultural conditions that made reunification inevitable. By showing both sides that their enemies were simply families who wanted to be together, Jimmy Cliff's music helped prepare the ground for the peaceful revolution that would soon transform not just Berlin but all of Eastern Europe. When reporters asked Jimmy years later about the impact of that concert, he smiled and said, "I just played music, man. But sometimes music reminds people who they really are, not East German or West German, not communist or capitalist, but human beings who need to love and be loved." That night, Berlin remembered it was one family, not two separate sides. If this incredible story of music, transcending political barriers, moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell for more amazing tales of how art can unite what politics divides. Share this video with someone who believes that love is stronger than any wall and that music can heal even the deepest divisions. Have you ever experienced a moment when music brought people together across seemingly impossible barriers? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to check out our other videos about the times when musicians helped change history simply by singing truth to power.